At first light, Eric Greenwood is making coffee in his quiet kitchen, but the silence in his home hides a storm. His wife Kate, whom he has loved for 10 years, has changed. New dresses, mysterious messages, a coldness in her eyes. When Eric accidentally sees a message from a stranger, his world comes crashing down. Will he find out the truth? And how far will he go to protect his heart? This story of betrayal, revenge, and the power born of pain will not leave you indifferent. The morning sun spilled through the blinds of a tidy suburban home in Seattle, painting golden stripes across the sleek quartz countertop where Eric Greenwood stood, brewing his coffee. The rich aroma of espresso filled the air, curling upward in lazy wisps of steam as he stirred in a splash of cream. At 38, Eric had built a life most would envy. A senior financial analyst at a thriving downtown firm, a modern house in a quiet neighborhood, and a marriage to Kate that had spanned a decade. But lately, the warmth of that life felt like it was slipping through his fingers, replaced by a nagging unease he couldn't quite name. Eric glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall, 6:45 a.m. The house was wrapped in the kind of stillness that used to feel peaceful, a canvas for their shared mornings. Now, it carried a sharper edge, like the silence before a storm. Upstairs, he heard the faint creak of floorboards, signaling Kate's descent. She appeared in the doorway, her auburn hair pulled into a neat bun, dressed in a tailored emerald dress he didn't recognize. Her movements were quick, almost restless, as she reached for her phone on the counter, her eyes flicking to the screen before she even acknowledged him. "Morning," Eric said, his voice steady but probing, testing the waters. He leaned against the counter, watching her closely. "Oh, hey," Kate replied, her tone distracted, fingers already dancing across her phone. A faint smile tugged at her lips, but it wasn't for him. It was for whatever glowed on that screen. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a gesture that once felt intimate but now seemed like a barrier. "Want breakfast?" "I could whip up some eggs," he offered, stirring his coffee slowly, his eyes never leaving her. He remembered weekends when they'd cooked together, laughing over burnt toast, planning hikes in the Cascades. Those days felt like a distant memory. "No time," she said, barely glancing up as she grabbed a thermal mug from the cabinet. "Big day at the office. Client pitches." She poured tea, another change. She'd switched from coffee a month ago, claiming it was calming. Eric noted the excuse, filing it away with the others. He nodded, sipping his coffee, the bitterness mirroring the thoughts swirling in his mind. Kate's mornings had shifted in ways that gnawed at him. She spent longer in front of the mirror, choosing outfits with a care she hadn't shown in years. Her phone was a constant companion, guarded like a secret. And then there were the late nights, meetings, she called them, but the details were always vague, her eyes skidding away when he asked. "Late one again tonight?" he asked, keeping his tone casual, though his pulse quickened. "Probably," she said, snapping her mug's lid into place. The team swamped. "Don't wait up." She flashed a smile, but it was perfunctory, like a door closing. Her phone buzzed, and that faint smile returned, brighter now, as she angled the screen away from him to type a quick reply. Eric's grip tightened on his mug, the ceramic warm against his palm. "I could swing by with lunch," he said, testing her again. "That new ramen spot near your office opened." Her eyes flicked up, meeting his for a split second before darting away. "That's sweet, but I've got a working lunch. Maybe another time." Her phone buzzed again, and she turned, grabbing her purse from the counter. "Gotta run, traffic's a nightmare." "Have a good day," Eric called as she hurried to the hallway mirror, smoothing her dress and checking her lipstick, a vivid red he didn't recall her wearing before. The front door clicked shut behind her, leaving the house emptier than it should have felt. Eric stood alone in the kitchen, his coffee cooling, the silence pressing in. He crossed to the window, watching her car, a sleek silver lease they'd picked out together, pull out of the driveway and disappear around the corner. His mind replayed the morning, cataloging the details that didn't add up, the new dress, the guarded phone, the smile that wasn't his. He'd always been good with patterns, a skill honed by years of analyzing market trends. And right now, the pattern forming in his home life pointed to something he didn't want to name. He carried his coffee to the living room, sinking into the leather couch, his laptop open but ignored. Work could wait. Instead, he thought back over the past few months, searching for the moment things had shifted. It wasn't one event, but a slow erosion, the way Kate's laughter had faded from their evenings, replaced by distracted silences, the private call she took in the guest room, her voice too low to catch, the password she'd added to her phone after years of leaving it unlocked. Each detail was a pebble, unremarkable alone, but piling into something undeniable. His phone pinged with a work email, but his thoughts stayed on Kate. He trusted her implicitly, built a life on that trust. They'd met in their late 20s, two ambitious souls navigating Seattle's tech boom. She was a marketing manager now, climbing the ladder at a glossy firm downtown. He'd always admired her drive, the way she could charm a room. But that charm felt distant now, redirected elsewhere. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Last week, when he'd reached for her phone to check the weather, she'd snatched it away, her laugh too quick, too brittle. Just work stuff, she'd said, but her cheeks had flushed. He hadn't pushed then, but the moment lingered, a splinter under his skin. Eric set his mug down, his jaw tight. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but he wasn't naive either. The signs were there, and ignoring them would only deepen the wound. He needed answers, not accusations, not yet, but facts. If Kate was hiding something, he'd find it. Not out of anger, but because he owed it to the life they'd built, to the man who'd poured 10 years into loving her. He stood, glancing at the clock, 7:15 a.m. time to get ready for work, but his day had a new purpose. He'd start small, keep his eyes open, piece together the truth like a balance sheet. Whatever he found, he'd face it head on. Because if there was one thing Eric Greenwood knew, it was how to uncover what others tried to hide. Eric Greenwood sat at his desk in the sleek, glass-walled office of his Seattle firm, the hum of fluorescent lights blending with the distant clatter of keyboards. Spreadsheets glowed on his monitor, numbers that should have demanded his focus, but his mind was elsewhere. The morning's unease clung to him like damp air, Kate's distracted smile and guarded phone replaying in his head. It had been 3 days since he'd seen that message from someone named Trevor, and the splinter of doubt had burrowed deeper, impossible to ignore. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. At 38, Eric prided himself on his clarity, his ability to spot patterns in chaos. It's what made him a top financial analyst, trusted to untangle million-dollar accounts. Now, he turned that skill inward, dissecting his marriage with the same precision. Kate's changes weren't random, new dresses, late nights, the way her eyes slid away from his. They were data points, and he needed to connect them. His phone buzzed, a reminder for a client meeting, but he ignored it, opening his laptop instead. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys. What he was about to do felt like crossing a line, but trust, he reasoned, didn't mean blindness. He logged into their joint bank account, something he rarely checked since Kate handled their day-to-day expenses. The transaction history loaded, and his breath caught. There they were, charges that didn't belong in their routine. A $200 dinner at a Capitol Hill bistro 2 weeks ago, when Kate had said she was at a team meeting. A $150 boutique purchase last month. No new clothes had appeared in their closet that he'd seen. And then, buried in the list, a $400 charge for a downtown hotel, dated for a weekend she'd claimed to be visiting her sister in Portland. Eric's jaw tightened, his pulse a steady drum in his ears. He cross-checked the dates, confirming what he already suspected. Kate hadn't been in Portland. Her sister had posted hiking photos that weekend, none featuring Kate. He opened another tab, pulling up their credit card statements. More clues emerged, a wine bar, a spa, charges that painted a picture of a life he wasn't part of. Each discovery was a needle, sharp but precise, stitching together a truth he wasn't ready to face. He closed the laptop, his hands steady despite the storm inside. Confronting her now would be messy, emotional. Kate was clever. She'd spin a story, and he'd be left with nothing but doubts. No, he needed more. Something undeniable. He grabbed his coat and left the office early, telling his assistant he had an errand. The lie came easily, a sign of how far he'd already drifted from the man who trusted blindly. Driving through Seattle's drizzle, Eric headed to Kate's office, a glossy building in the heart of downtown. He didn't plan to barge in, that wasn't his style, but he wanted to see her routine, to catch a glimpse of the world she was hiding. He parked across the street, blending into the city's pulse, and waited. At 5:30 p.m., Kate emerged, her emerald dress catching the fading light. She wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall, maybe mid-30s, in a tailored suit, his dark hair slicked back with practiced ease. They paused at the curb, laughing, her hand brushing his arm in a way that felt too familiar, too deliberate. Eric's grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he forced himself to stay calm, to observe. The man, Trevor, he assumed, gestured toward a bar down the street, and Kate nodded, her smile brighter than Eric had seen in months. They crossed the street, disappearing into the crowd, and Eric sat there, the engine idling, his mind racing. He could follow them, demand answers, but that would tip his hand. Instead, he drove home, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield. Back in their quiet house, Eric moved with purpose. Kate had texted she'd be late, another team meeting giving him time. He went to her desk in the study, a space she'd claimed for work. Her laptop was locked, but her planner lay open, a careless oversight. He flipped through it, finding scribbled notes. T, 7 p.m., The Nest, tea dinner, Friday. No context, but the pattern was clear. He snapped photos with his phone, his hand steady despite the ache in his chest. The bathroom was next. Kate's makeup bag sat on the counter, overflowing with new lipsticks and perfumes he didn't recognize. Tucked inside, he found a receipt for lingerie, black lace, expensive, dated a week ago. He hadn't seen her wear it. The receipt joined his growing collection of evidence, each piece hardening his resolve. Later, when Kate came home, her cheeks flushed from the chilly evening, Eric was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry. He played the part of the oblivious husband, asking about her day, watching her responses. "Oh, just presentations," she said, avoiding his eyes as she poured a glass of wine. Her phone stayed close, buzzing once, then twice. She glanced at it, her lips curving slightly before she silenced it. "Everything okay?" Eric asked, his voice light, though his pulse spiked. "Just work," she said, too quickly. "Deadlines." He nodded, slicing a pepper with deliberate care. "Must be intense. You've been so busy lately." She hesitated, then laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, it's nonstop. I'm beat." She excused herself to shower, leaving her phone on the counter for a fleeting moment. Eric stared at it, tempted, but he didn't touch it. Not yet. He needed to be sure, to build a case that couldn't be dismantled by tears or excuses. That night, lying beside her in their king-sized bed, Eric stared at the ceiling, the fan spinning lazy circles above. Kate's breathing was even, but he knew she wasn't asleep. Her body was too tense, curled away from him. The space between them felt like a chasm, wider than the inches separating their pillows. He thought of the man at the curb, the receipt, the hotel charge. The life they'd built, dinners at Pike Place, rainy weekends binging documentaries, was unraveling, and he was the only one fighting to hold it together. By morning, Eric's plan had solidified. He'd keep watching, collecting, waiting for the moment when the truth was irrefutable. At work, he dug deeper, using his lunch break to search Trevor Lawson online. LinkedIn revealed a senior account manager at Kate's firm, mid-30s, with a polished headshot and glowing reviews about his client rapport. Eric's stomach churned, but he kept going, cross-referencing Trevor's name with the bar from Kate's planner. A quick check of the bar's social media showed tagged photos from last week, a group shot, Trevor's arm slung casually around Kate's shoulders, her smile radiant. Eric saved the image, his jaw tight. The evidence was mounting, each piece a brick in a wall he was building, not to trap Kate, but to protect himself. He didn't know where this would lead, confrontation, separation, or something else, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't let her lies rewrite their story. Whatever Trevor was to her, whatever she'd chosen over their marriage, Eric would uncover it all. And when he did, he'd make sure they both faced the consequences. Eric Greenwood stood in the kitchen of their Seattle home, the scent of fresh basil and garlic wafting from the oven where a lasagna bubbled, its edges crisping to perfection. The dining room table was set for 3 linen napkins, a bottle of Merlot breathing in the center, candles flickering softly. To an outsider, it looked like a cozy evening planned with care, a gesture to rekindle a marriage's spark. But Eric's calm exterior masked a storm of purpose. Tonight wasn't about reconciliation, it was about exposure. For 2 weeks, he'd gathered evidence of Kate's betrayal, bank statements, receipts, photos of her with Trevor Lawson, her colleague and apparent lover. The truth had solidified like concrete. She was living a double life, and he was done playing the fool. Confronting her alone risked denials, tears, or worse, manipulation. Instead, Eric had devised a plan to bring the truth into the open on his terms. He'd invited Trevor to dinner, framing it as Kate's idea, a team appreciation gesture. She'd agreed, her hesitation masked by a strained smile, unaware of the trap waiting to spring. Eric adjusted a fork on the table, his movements deliberate, his pulse steady despite the adrenaline simmering beneath. At 38, he'd learned to channel emotion into strategy, a a skill honed by years of navigating high-stakes deals at his firm. Tonight, that skill would serve a different purpose. He glanced at the clock, 6:45 p.m. Kate would be home any minute, Trevor soon after. The stage was set, every detail calculated to unravel their lies without a single raised fist. The front door clicked open, and Kate stepped inside, her heels tapping against the hardwood. She wore a navy blouse and pencil skirt, her auburn hair loose, framing a face that carried a flicker of unease. "Smells amazing," she called, setting her purse down, her eyes darting to the dining room. "You went all out." "Thought it'd be nice," Eric said, emerging from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His voice was warm, but his gaze held hers a beat too long, searching for cracks. "You said Trevor's been a big help at work. Figured we owe him a thank you." Kate's smile faltered, her fingers brushing her phone before she caught herself. "Right, yeah. It's thoughtful." She busied herself with her coat, avoiding his eyes. Eric noted the tension in her shoulders, the way she glanced at the door, as if weighing her escape. Before she could say more, the doorbell rang, sharp and punctual. Eric crossed to open it, revealing Trevor, mid-30s, polished in a charcoal suit, a bottle of wine in hand and a grin that oozed confidence. "Eric, good to meet you properly," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his eyes appraising, like a man used to charming his way through any room. "Likewise," Eric replied, his smile tight but polite. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The three settled at the table, the air thick with unspoken tension. Eric poured wine, his movements smooth, while Kate fidgeted with her napkin, her laugh too quick when Trevor complimented the setup. They made small talk, work, the Seahawks, Seattle's endless rain, but Eric steered the conversation with precision, laying the groundwork. "So, Trevor," he said, passing the lasagna, "Kate's been singing your praises. Late nights, big projects. Sounds like you two are quite the team." Trevor chuckled, slicing into his food. "She's the star, really. I just keep up." He shot Kate a glance, warm and familiar, and she smiled back, though her eyes flicked to Eric nervously. Eric nodded, sipping his wine. "Must be intense. All those meetings. I noticed some charges, fancy dinners, a hotel downtown. Thought they were client things, but Kate's been so vague." His tone was casual, but the words landed like stones, rippling through the room. Kate's fork paused midair, her face paling. "Oh, those were team outings," she said, her voice too bright. "You know how it is, whining and dining clients." "Right," Eric said, his eyes locking on hers. "Except I checked with your assistant, Kate. No client dinners those nights." He leaned back, letting the silence stretch, watching her squirm. Trevor cleared his throat, his grin fading. "Probably a mix-up. Happens all the time." He reached for his glass, but his hand trembled slightly, betraying his composure. Eric's smile was cold now, surgical. "Funny thing, Trevor. I found a receipt for lingerie, too. Black lace, not my taste. And then there's this." He slid his phone across the table, a photo glowing on the screen, Kate and Trevor at a bar, his arm around her. Her laugh caught mid-frame. "Care to explain?" Kate's breath hitched, her eyes wide with panic. "Eric, it's not what you think." "Don't," he cut her off, his voice low but firm, no trace of anger, only certainty. "I've got emails, texts, hotel bookings. 6 months, Kate. 6 months of lies while you sat across from me at breakfast." Trevor pushed his chair back, his face flushed. "Look, man, this is a misunderstanding. We're just colleagues." "Then why did you text her about missing her?" Eric's gaze shifted to Trevor, pinning him. "Or tell her you couldn't wait for tonight." "I saw it all, Trevor. Every message." The room seemed to shrink, the candles' glow casting long shadows. Kate's hand shook as she gripped the table. "Eric, please, let me explain." But Trevor, cornered, snapped first, his voice rising. "She told me you two were done, Eric. Said you were distant, that she was leaving you." He turned to Kate, his eyes blazing. "You said it was just us, Kate. Was that a lie too?" Kate recoiled, tears welling. "No, I didn't mean it like that. I was confused, Enough," Eric said, standing, his height commanding the room. His voice stayed even, but it carried a weight that silenced them both. "Trevor, you're done here. Get out of my house. Kate, we'll talk later." "Alone." Trevor hesitated, then grabbed his jacket, muttering something about crazy as he bolted for the door. It slammed behind him, leaving a ringing silence. Kate sat frozen, tears streaking her cheeks, her carefully curated facade crumbling. "Eric," she whispered, reaching for him. "I messed up. I'm so sorry." We can fix this. He stepped back, out of her reach, his expression unreadable. You didn't just mess up, Kate. You chose this. Every lie, every night you spent with him, that was a choice. He turned toward the kitchen, pausing at the doorway. Dinner's over. I'll be upstairs. Don't follow me. As he climbed the stairs, her sobs echoed below, raw and desperate. Eric closed the bedroom door, leaning against it, his calm facade finally cracking. The pain was there, sharp and deep, but so was something else, resolve. He'd exposed their betrayal, stripped away their excuses, and it felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. But the hardest part was still ahead. Kate was still his wife, for now, and the life they'd built hung in tatters. What came next would test him more than tonight's trap, but he was ready. No more lies, no more shadows. Whatever the cost, he'd face the truth head-on. Eric Greenwood stood on the balcony of his new apartment in downtown Seattle, the city skyline glittering against a twilight sky. The Space Needle pierced the horizon, a quiet reminder of the life he'd left behind and the one he was building now. 3 months had passed since the night he'd unraveled Kate's betrayal, exposing her affair with Trevor Lawson over a tense dinner. The house they'd shared, a monument to a decade of promises, was sold, its memories packed away like the boxes he'd donated to charity. At 38, Eric was starting over, and though the scars of betrayal lingered, they no longer defined him. The air was crisp, carrying the briny tang of Puget Sound. Eric sipped a black coffee, his morning ritual unchanged despite the upheaval. The divorce was final now, the papers signed after weeks of Kate's desperate pleas and her lawyer's futile arguments. The prenup had held firm, infidelity was a clear violation, leaving her with only her personal savings, depleted by her secret indulgences with Trevor. The house, the investments, the stability she'd taken for granted were Eric's alone, a foundation for his next chapter. He didn't gloat, but he felt a quiet justice in it, a balance restored. His phone lay silent on the balcony railing, no longer buzzing with Kate's texts or unknown numbers. The last one had come a week ago. I've learned my lesson, Eric. I hope you're happy. He deleted it without replying, blocking her latest attempt to reach him. Closure wasn't about her regret. It was about his peace, and he was finding it, piece by piece. The city hummed below, alive with possibility, and for the first time in months, Eric felt like he was part of it again. The fallout had rippled beyond their marriage. Kate's career, once a point of pride, had faltered. Office gossip about her affair spread like wildfire, fueled by colleagues who'd seen her with Trevor at dimly lit bars. Her demotion became a resignation when a key client dropped her team, citing trust issues. She'd landed a lower-paying job at a small agency across town, scraping by in a shared apartment, her designer wardrobe replaced by thrift store finds. Eric heard this through Marcus, his friend and colleague, who relayed it with a mix of pity and caution. She's struggling, Marcus had said over beers last week. Says she's sorry. Eric had shrugged, his voice steady. Sorry doesn't rebuild what she broke. He meant it, not out of spite, but clarity. Kate's choices had carved her path, just as his were shaping his. Trevor's fall was sharper. Eric's anonymous tip to HR, carefully worded, no names, just screenshots hinting at inappropriate conduct, had sparked an internal review. Clients pulled back, wary of his reputation, and Trevor left the firm quietly, resurfacing at a lesser company in Tacoma. Social media told the rest. His polished charm had dulled, his posts sparse, his life smaller. Eric didn't track him obsessively, but the updates reached him through the grapevine, a reminder that actions had weight. Inside, Eric's apartment was sparse but intentional, clean lines, a leather couch, a shelf of finance books next to a new photography guide. He'd signed up for a class last month, a one that became a passion. Capturing the city's angles, the way light hit the waterfront, the blur of commuters, gave him focus, a way to see beauty in the ordinary. Running helped too, his morning jogs along Alki Beach clearing the fog of betrayal. He wasn't healed, not fully, but he was moving forward, each step a reclaiming of himself. His phone pinged, pulling him from his thoughts. A text from Marcus. Drinks tonight at the Nest? You've earned it. Eric smiled, typing back. I'm in. 7 p.m. The Nest was a bar he'd avoided since finding Kate's planner note about meeting Trevor there, but tonight felt right. A chance to rewrite the space with new memories. He wasn't ready to date, the wound too fresh for that, but friendship, laughter, a cold IPA, those were steps he could take. As he dressed, jeans, a crisp sweater, no trace of the suits that defined his old life. Eric caught his reflection in the mirror. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, etched by months of sleepless nights. But his gaze was clear, unburdened. He thought of the man he'd been before the dinner, before the receipts and lies. Trusting, steady, blind. That Eric was gone, replaced by someone sharper, less naive. He'd lost faith in easy promises, but he'd gained something better, certainty in his own worth. Downstairs, the bar was lively, neon lights casting a warm glow over wood-paneled walls. Marcus waved from a corner booth, 2 pints already waiting. "You look good, man," he said as Eric slid in. "Like you're, I dunno, back." "Getting there," Eric said, clinking his glass against Marcus's. They talked easily. Work, baseball, a new project Eric was pitching at the firm. No mention of Kate, no pitying glances. It was ordinary, and that felt extraordinary. His phone stayed quiet, but as he laughed at Marcus's terrible impression of their boss, a memory surfaced. Kate on the porch, tears streaking her face, begging for a second chance. He'd close the door then, and he'd keep it closed now. She wasn't his problem anymore, nor was Trevor. They'd built their own cages, Kate with her lies, Trevor with his arrogance, and Eric had no obligation to unlock them. Later, walking home through Pioneer Square, the city's pulse matched his own. Street musicians played, their notes mingling with the chatter of late-night crowds. Eric paused, snapping a photo of a busker strumming a guitar, the light catching his weathered hands. It was a small moment, but it felt like a piece of a life he was choosing, not one handed to him. Back in his apartment, Eric poured a glass of water, the whiskey days behind him. He opened his laptop, pulling up his latest photos, tweaking the contrast on one from the waterfront. The work steadied him, a reminder that he could create, not just rebuild. He thought of the years with Kate, their wedding in a rainy vineyard, her laugh at his bad puns, the plans for a family they'd never started. Those memories didn't vanish, but they no longer owned him. They were chapters, closed now, and the story ahead was his to write. As he shut the laptop, his phone glowed with a notification. A new email, work-related, nothing urgent. No ghosts from the past, no pleas or apologies. He set it down, crossing to the balcony again. The city sparkled, alive and vast, and Eric felt a surge of something close to hope. He'd survived betrayal, not by sinking to anger, but by rising above it. Kate and Trevor had faced their consequences, not through his vengeance, but through the simple truth of their actions. And Eric? He was free, not just from them, but to become the man he wanted to be. He lingered there, the night wrapping around him, and knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, he'd never let anyone dim his light again. Do you think forgiveness is possible after such betrayal? Or is walking away the only way? Write in the comments your thoughts.